Hey guys, Sandra here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Today's video is part 2 of the step-by-step 3-stage correction and protection series on this Alfa Giulietta QV. Part 1 covered the pre-inspection, documentation and engine bay clean. In this episode, I'll be covering the 3 stages of decontamination I go through in preparation for the correction stage. Just before we get into the first stage, which is the decontamination wash, I just want to note that the rims, tyres and wheel wells are usually my next step before the wash. But as these rims were literally painted a day ago, I want to give the paint a little more time to set and cure before I get to them. So I may add the wheel stage to the end of the series or do a separate video on them once I get around to doing them. So firstly, let me explain what I'm trying to achieve with this more aggressive wash stage and the importance of a 2-bucket wash specifically for the decontamination wash. This stage is vital for stripping not only the dirt and road grime, but also for removing any existing wax or sealant that is going to largely slow down and potentially cause issues when I begin compounding and polishing. Wax residue and sealant polymers present when polishing will quickly gunk up your machine's pads, reduce and alter the effectiveness of the compound or polish itself, and mask the true finish of the paint as you remove and reapply these polymers simultaneously as you're polishing. The reason you shouldn't use a standard car wash detergent for this decontamination stage is that they are specifically engineered not to remove wax or sealants, and usually contain polymers of their own, which when you're doing a regular maintenance wash is fine. But for stripping the paint in preparation for polishing, you need to use something more aggressive that won't add any polymers to the finish. There are specific car wash detergents out there for decontamination washes which generally should do the job. But personally, for reasons such as cost and effectiveness, I use my own mix of chemicals for this stage, which is equal parts of Meguiar's Super Degreaser, Autobrite's Maggi Foam, and dishwash liquid. These are then diluted, depending on the paint's condition, at about 1 to 50 parts water in my wash bucket and 1 to 5 parts water in my pressure washer's foam lance. And just to elaborate on them, the degreaser is there to break down the more stubborn polymers and oily road grime. The dishwash detergent also aids in doing the same thing, but then also helps remove the degreaser's residue. And the Maggi Foam, which is a great decon wash in its own right, is largely there for the great consistency, foaming and clinging ability it provides. So the 2-bucket method is firstly vital for much the same reason when doing a regular maintenance wash, in that it'll greatly reduce potential scratches by rinsing off your wash mitt after each panel in the second bucket to remove the dirt it's picked up. But it's also doubly important when doing a decontamination wash for the reasons that you are not only removing an increased amount of dirt and more stubborn road grime, but also a substantial amount of wax and or polymer residue that needs to be rinsed off your wash mitt frequently to achieve a better, more effective and safer decontamination wash. The pre-wash pressure rinse is basically the most effective way to remove dirt and road grime from your paint without physically touching it. In most cases, you can remove a good 80% or so of contaminants with just this stage. And that's huge when you consider the massive reduction that means in potentially scratching the paint in the hand wash stage. But you need to be aware of what you're trying to accomplish and how you go about it. I know it may seem self-explanatory, but all too often I see guys just waving the pressure washer wand about and keeping the tip a meter or two away from the paint. It's not going to magically blast bonded grime away by simply pointing it at the car and shaking the gun about. You need to be methodical with your technique. The same way you hand wash a section at a time, you need to pressure wash in the same manner. Make sure the beam runs over every area of the vehicle. Keep it moving at a steady speed, but don't go too fast. Give it time to work and keep it a foot or so away from the surface. Not a meter or more away, as you should be using a wide fan tip for washing cars, which is more than safe at that distance. There seems to be a little debate over whether you should snow foam a vehicle before or after rinsing it, and whether you should then rinse the foam off before you hand wash. I can only go by what has given me the best results. When I've foamed the car without pressure rinsing it first, I've found two issues with that. Firstly, rather than the foam working to help remove the more stubborn contaminants, it just becomes less effective as it has a lot more dirt to deal with that would otherwise be gone during the initial pressure rinse, and it can't as effectively treat the more stubborn contaminants that the pressure rinse is unable to remove. Secondly, without the first rinse, the foam just dries up much faster, reduces your work time window, and increases the likelihood of the residue drying on the paint. In relation to rinsing off the foam before you hand wash, I've personally found that any dirt or contaminants that don't come off during the first pressure rinse won't come off with the second pressure rinse just because you've foamed it and let it dwell beforehand. The reason I foam the vehicle is to soften up those contaminants so that they will be both easier and safer to remove in the hand wash stage. And as I've stated in previous videos, water is primarily a solvent, so the added lubrication that the snow foam provides will greatly aid in producing a far safer wash. For a detail of this level, once the foam has been applied, I use my Swiss Vax exterior brush to go over and treat all the tight edges around the exterior trims to help loosen and remove the dirt particles and polish and wax residue that loves to settle in those small crevices. This is done because the wash mitt won't be able to reach and get into those small, narrow edges. And just like washing with your mitt, you don't need to use much pressure. Just let the brush do the work to loosen and clean those areas. And if a certain trim has more stubborn grime, don't attack them more aggressively, causing scratches. Just note the area in your mind and use the follow-up pressure rinse to finish the job. For the hand wash, I'm using a Gion Smoothie wash mitt, which I really like for the fact that it does hold a lot of liquid, is a great size for me, works both fine as a mitt or a wash pad, and is great for both maintenance and most decontamination washes. If the paint was far more contaminated, I would have used something like the Meguiar's Wool Wash Mitt for its greater cleaning and stripping ability. But it's also more aggressive on the paint, and for this specific job, that's just not needed. As far as washing method and technique is concerned, I start at the roof of the vehicle and work my way around and down the car. I wash a panel at a time, then flip the mitt to do a second panel, then rinse both sides off in my rinse bucket using the grit guard to help clean the mitt for the next two panels. As I get to the dirtier lower sections of the vehicle, I tend to do smaller sections and rinse more often. I use straight up and down strokes with little pressure and let the detergent and the mitt do the work. For decontamination washes, I tend to do an extra pass or two for each area as I go to help aid in removing the wax or sealant that usually needs a little more work to be removed. Also, just be aware of the weather. And when possible, try to wash first thing in the morning or late in the evening when the sun is at its lowest. An overcast and cold day, such as the one I had, is ideal for this decontamination process. as it increases your work time and avoids issues of the detergents drying on the vehicle. I hope that explains what I use, how I go about it, and why I choose to do so in the first decontamination wash stage. My second stage of decontamination is iron and tar removal. Basically, iron fallout and road tar come from a variety of sources but have the common characteristics of creating strong bonds to the car's paint that even aggressive washing detergents will struggle to remove. Over time, these fine particles will begin to etch their way through any paint protection and then into the paint itself. The longer they are left on the surface, the greater bond they'll create, and the more damage they'll instill, from breaking down waxes, sealants and coatings, to rusting on the vehicle's paint and even contributing to clear coat failure. Generally, clay can remove a large amount of these particles on its own, but rarely all of them, and what's more, trying to remove all of these contaminants by claying alone will result in a far more aggressive, scratch-induced finish on the paint. So the more of these bonded particles you can remove or at least reduce in size during this stage will make the claying process far safer and quicker. CarPro's Iron X works by causing a chemical reaction when it comes in contact with bare ferrous particles such as iron and begins to dissolve and break them down in a visual display that turns purple to let you know that it's working. On a red paint such as this, or most dark coloured paints, it's really hard to see the reaction, but on white and light coloured paints you'll certainly notice it. The vast majority of environmental fallout tends to settle on the car's horizontal surfaces such as the roof, boot and bonnet, but the brake dust particles are what make the rims always the worst affected area. Generally, I'll use Iron X for the top half of the vehicle as road tar rarely affects those areas, but for the lower parts and panels of the car, I'll use a combination of iron and tar, such as CarPro's Tricks, to both treat the tar and iron fallout that affects those areas. Tar removal chemicals won't cause a colour reaction, but are quite aggressive even in comparison to iron removal chemicals. So don't let the lack of visual colour reaction fool you, or the fact that they don't smell as bad as iron removal chemicals, which really stink. As far as application goes, I just spray them on evenly, about 5 to 10 minutes after rinsing the car off from the wash stage. You don't want to spray them on a really wet surface as you will reduce their effectiveness, but personally I've found that they work best for me if the vehicle is just slightly wet, as it extends my work time window without really compromising their effectiveness. Depending on the weather, you have about 5 minutes or so to spray them on and work them in with a microfiber cloth or pad to get a more even coverage. But the idea is to spread the solution around, not try to collect the residue. And then thoroughly rinse it off. You don't want to let them dry on the surface or stay on for too long, as they can stain the paint or certain trims. But use them correctly and you shouldn't have any issues at all. And when dealing with heavily contaminated vehicles, you can treat the car a second time if needed. After these two stages of decontamination, you should really begin to see quite a difference in the paint's water behaviour, with less beading and sheeting, which is exactly what you want, as it's showing you that the paint is becoming bare and free of contaminants and wax or sealants. The third and final decontamination stage is claying. For a car that isn't overly contaminated, such as this one, an extra fine clay like CarPro's ultra fine clay is best, as this grade of clay is more than sufficient to tackle this level of contamination without inducing more marring on the paint that a coarser grade of clay would produce. Overall, when it comes down to the balance of increased decontamination as well as less marring, traditional clay is still the best product in my opinion, but there's always a trade-off. Whereas some of the newer clay pads, blocks and towels can do quite a good job significantly faster, they may also induce more marring and in certain tight areas be less effective. So on this level of job, traditional clay is still my preferred product. As far as lubrication goes, I found that CarPro's Echo at a 1:15 dilution provides a great balance of slip that really reduces potential marring that claying can produce. The only real issue with Echo 2 is that you'll need to give the whole vehicle a final alcohol-based wipe down once you're done to remove its residue. But as I'll always do that anyway on a detail such as this before I begin compounding, it isn't an issue for me. The CarPro Boa towel is perfect for the wipe down as you clay each section, as it can really store a great amount of liquid and its plush fibres are great for sucking up those loose contaminants within without causing further marring on the finish. As for my method and technique, I begin claying straight after rinsing the iron and tar removal products, with the paint still relatively wet. As I go from one decontamination stage straight to the next, there's no need to dry off the car after each stage, as the water will both further aid in softening those contaminants and extending my work time window with each stage. I like to mould the clay into about a 2-inch pad that can work both on my fingertips and inside the palm of my hand. I use only light pressure and straight vertical or horizontal swipes, basically to minimise any potential scratches caused by particles of grit that can dislodge and attach themselves to the clay. Basically, straight scratches are both less visible and easier to remove, so if I had to scratch the paint, I'd much prefer straight scratches as opposed to circular ones. So once again, working from top to bottom, I give each panel a liberal spray of Echo 2 and begin the claying process using small, straight, overlapping passes. I use my fingertips to feel the progress I'm making as I go, and I feel for a smooth but also slightly tacky finish, which is exactly what bare, contaminant-free paint should feel like. I'll continue claying the surface until it's where I want it to be, and if there's some areas with more stubborn fallout, I'll simply work the same technique over them more times rather than changing to a more aggressive technique. After each section, I'll visually inspect the clay bar to see how many contaminants it's picked up, and fold it over twice to remove those particles from the outer surface and create a new clean slate to start with each new section. Each car and section is different, so don't feel you have to clay more than is necessary. If the paint or surface feels good after only a light quick pass, leave it at that and move on. As you can see, clay is not just for paint. It's fantastic for the outer glass, as well as smooth, non-textured plastics and metal. So apart from the textured plastics and rubber trims, pretty much every other surface of this car is being clayed to give me a bare clean slate that I can then so much more effectively go ahead and correct and protect with far greater results. Lastly, I'll go ahead and give the door jambs and rims a quick wipe down to avoid any water spotting in those areas. If I was to go straight into taping and compounding, I'd be using my air compressor's gun to blow the water out from all the tight edges and crevices, as that water would cause issues when I'm trying to tape up those edges or compound. But as I'm done for the day, the Alpha will go into the garage overnight and be dry by tomorrow when I start those stages. The last thing that I want to point out is why I do this whole decontamination process. To put it plainly, I do it because it not only speeds up the correction stage of detailing, but also allows me to achieve far better results. Trust me when I tell you that I'm not someone who quickly and easily adopts and changes to new techniques and products. That's not to say that I don't continually try new methods and products, because I do and love to. But for me to change to a new product as my new go-to, or to abandon the way I currently do things, only comes about with extensive testing and proven results. And believe me when I say that I wouldn't be spending hours of going through this process if it wasn't beneficial to my work. Well, that wraps up part 2 of this series. I hope you stay tuned for part 3 as we get a little further into this detail. As always, thanks for watching, and please consider subscribing, commenting, or at least giving the video a thumbs up to show your support. Cheers guys, and I'll see you in the next video.